The media we consume teaches us a lot about the world around us. Through movies and shows, we get a glimpse into the lives of others, and it helps us to reevaluate things in our own lives. Today, I wanted to analyze some romantic comedies throughout the years and figure out what exactly do they teach us about love. Since I was born in the mid-90s, we will just start there. The first movie we're going to be talking about is While You Were Sleeping. This movie is about a train station attendant named Lucy who has been in love with this guy named Peter for a very long time. She sees him every day on his commute to work, and she just has this really big crush on him. And then one day, Peter falls onto the train tracks and Lucy saves him. During the accident, he gets hurt and falls into a coma. So Lucy visits him in the hospital, where she meets Peter's family, and Peter's family somehow get this idea that she is his fiance, and she really doesn't know how to correct them. So while Peter is in a coma, Lucy spends a lot of time with his family, and she really gets to know them and they bond. She doesn't have a whole lot of family or friends herself, so being in this big family, she feels very loved and accepted, and it makes it harder and harder for her to be able to tell the truth. She grows especially close with Peter's brother, Jack. After some time, Peter finally wakes up and he doesn't remember Lucy at all. His family assumes it's amnesia, and his godfather, who's the only one that knows Lucy's secret, convinces him to propose to Lucy. His line of thinking is that since the whole family is already head over heels in love with Lucy, then it wouldn't be that hard for Peter to fall in love with her as well. So now it's their wedding day, and Lucy confesses everything, including her feelings for Jack. And then she runs off. So Lucy goes back to her everyday life, and one day Jack comes into her work and proposes to her. They get married, and Lucy finally gets to go to Italy, which is one of her lifelong dreams. So what does While You Were Sleeping teach us about love? I think that this movie says that you really have to get to know a person before you know that you love them. You can't go off of just basic surface level things. Lucy thought she loved Peter because of what she saw of him, and when she actually got the chance to get to know him, she realized that she actually loves Jack because she had gotten to spend so much time with him, and she really got to know him personally. She realized that what she loved about Peter was very surface level, and what she loved about Jack was personal, and it meant so much more to her than just, the surface level stuff. I think it also says that sometimes love comes from unexpected places and at unexpected times. Lucy didn't expect to fall in love with Jack when she did, but it happened. So the next movie we're going to be talking about is 10 Things I Hate About You. So the summary of this movie is kind of complicated, and I really didn't know how to put it into words because there's so many layers to the story. So I'm just going to read off of my notes, hope that's okay. So the premise is this kid named Cameron wants to date this girl, but the girl can't date until her sister Kat does. But everybody hates Kat. So the girl asks Cameron to find somebody to date Kat so that she can date him, but not actually because she's interested in somebody else. So she's taking advantage of Cameron's attraction to her. So they get another guy, the guy that the girl actually likes, and he has a lot of money. So they get him to hire another guy named Patrick to date Kat. Are you keeping up? Is this a little bit complicated? Like I said, there's so many layers to this freaking movie, and there's so many different characters, and it's just, whoa, it's just crazy. So I've never actually watched this movie all the way through. I remember that there was a paintball scene, that there was a scene where this girl flashed her teacher. I also remember there was a grand romantic gesture where the guy was singing in the bleachers, but that's pretty much all I remember about this movie. I have never seen it from beginning to end until the other day. So if I had known this was a bet-centered movie, I probably would have watched She's All That instead. I know that this movie is more of like a for-hire situation than a bet, but it still has the same effect. Kat is going to be really hurt when she finds out the truth, and she thought that somebody was showing genuine interest in her when all of that was a lie. And it's just kind of sad and uncomfortable to watch. And I know Patrick had second doubts, about halfway through the movie, and he kind of wanted to break off the agreement with those guys, but he still continued to accept their money up until almost the end of the movie. And when she asked him why he is so interested in her going to prom. He gets mad at her, like irrationally mad. It's just a mess to me. Like, this movie, it just felt wrong. Like, I get why people love this movie. It does have its romantic moments. Like, the paintball scene was really cute, and the grand romantic gesture was also cute. But the whole story is just really manipulative, and I just don't like it. And I don't like She's All That either. I like some elements of She's All That, but I don't really like the whole bet thing. It's an aspect in a lot of movies, and I just don't get it. I'm just like, can we throw that away? Can we just not do that anymore? I just think that if you start a relationship on dishonest terms, it's probably not a good recipe for a healthy relationship. But in the end, they end up together, and he buys her guitar, and it's very sweet. But does that make up for all the stuff that he's done to her? I don't know. I just don't know. So what does 10 Things I Hate About You teach us about love? This one was a little bit harder to pinpoint. There were a lot of love stories in this movie. The main one was between Kat and Patrick, so I guess we'll focus on that one. I think it teaches that you can fall in love with people even if they aren't your type. It kind of happened for both Kat and Patrick. They both weren't looking for a relationship at the time, and I think if they were, they probably would not have initially chosen each other. They both fell in love unexpectedly. So I think that's the lesson of this movie, that you can fall in love unexpectedly, which was very similar to While You Were Sleeping. So maybe that's a common theme for rom-coms. So the next movie we're going to be talking about is Never Been Kissed. So this is a movie about a young reporter named Josie. She's about 25. She's very idealistic about love. She kind of views love in a very fairy tale type of way. She views love in a way where, like, if you meet the one, you will know it. That sort of thing. So she works as a journalist for a newspaper, and her boss wants her to go undercover as a high school student to get a scoop on the youths of the world. She is really excited up until she remembers what her actual high school experience was and how she was kind of a loser in high school. So she's not really prepared for this project, to say the least. But she goes in, and she is kind of having a very similar experience to what she had the first time around. She doesn't have like the coolest clothes. She kind of acts a little fumbly. She's very clumsy. The popular kids don't like her. But she does meet this girl named Aldi. I can't remember her name or how to pronounce it. Let's just call her A, because her name starts with A. So she meets this girl named A, and they form a friendship, and she invites her to be in her like math club or whatever. And so Josie's having this really good time in high school again, and she has a crush on one of her teachers, and her teacher seems to kind of like her back, which is kind of strange, but okay. So weeks go by, and the boss is kind of like, hey, what's going on? We need a scoop. We need a story. You need to hurry up, basically. And they give her a hidden camera and tell her to make friends with the popular kids so that she can figure out what they're up to, because it's probably more exciting than, math club. After some time with still no story, her boss tells her that she needs to just write about that teacher that's falling in love with her. Kind of like an expose. And she insists that she can find a new story because she doesn't really like this idea. So prom comes around, and she wins prom queen, but her new popular friends try to play a prank on A, so she steps in, intervenes, and basically blows her whole cover. She tells everyone that she's this 25-year-old undercover reporter, and she makes this big speech talking about how kind A was to her when they first met, and how nobody's going to remember or care about anything that happened in high school, so none of this even matters. And then everyone claps for Josie, and she leaves prom, goes out to the garden, and her teacher overhears her talking with one of her coworkers, and her coworker mentions, the expose on the teacher. So he's mad, and she tries to explain herself, but he's not having any of it, and then he leaves. Then her article comes out, and it's an article about her experience in high school before when she was a kid, and compared it to now, and how her experience second time around in high school has really helped her find herself, and it also helped her find her one true love, or something like that. And in the article, she asked the teacher to come meet her before the big game to kiss her. It's this whole big thing. There's like a bunch of reporters there. Everybody's really excited to see what happens with Josie and her kiss. And just when you think he's not going to show up, he does. They kiss, and it's happily ever after. So one quick thing that I think I would have changed about this movie is I think that she could have confided in A, and she would have had somebody who knew what was going on in the school. I feel like A could keep a secret, you know. It could be like her confidant in school. She would have somebody on her side, and A wouldn't feel betrayed after she found out what was actually going on. All this stuff. I feel like that would have been kind of a cool aspect to add to this movie. Another thing I thought that was really weird about this movie, and a lot of people I think feel this way, but I thought it was weird that Josie and the teacher kind of flirted a little bit, even though he thought that she was a student. It's just really weird. I feel like throughout this whole movie, adults are so close to kissing kids. It's just so bizarre. Like, her brother even goes back to high school with her, and he has like a girlfriend. They don't ever do anything, but it just looks like they might, and I don't know. It's kind of gross to me. Also, why did the teacher ask Josie to dance at prom? I don't think that's a normal thing that teachers do at prom. Is it? And lastly, before we get to what this movie teaches us about love, is I just wanted to mention that in a lot of high school movies, there's this big speech scene, and it's kind of like overdone. It's always this big moment, and either everybody claps or they cheer or whatever. It's just like way overdone, and a lot of the times it even happens at prom, like in this movie. And it's not just older movies either. Like, this is a trend that keeps on going. The most recent example of this is in the movie He's All That, which is the She's All That remake that was on Netflix. In that movie, the main girl does this big speech about being fake and all that. People are still doing this. Like, filmmakers are still doing the big speech at the end of the movie, and it's kind of overdone. I'm just done with it. So anyways, what does Never Been Kissed teach us about love? Not a whole lot, really. That soulmates exist, and sometimes you have to go back to high school to find... No, that's not right. That maybe you have to find yourself before you find love. Maybe? Those are my best guesses. Like I said before, Josie has this idealized fantasy about love, and it really reflects in the message of this movie. I think it all boils down to, if you meet the one, you will know it. It's very fairy tale-like. So we have exited the 90s, and now we are getting into the 2000s with our first movie, Bridget Jones' Diary. So this movie is a little complicated to kind of summarize. On paper and verbally, it can probably come across as a little bit convoluted. A lot happens in this movie, even though it's only like an hour and a half long. It is based on Pride and Prejudice, and it is about a woman named Bridget who, after being insulted by a man, goes on this journey of reinvention. She wants to improve her life and lose weight and all this. So she gets her a diary to document everything. She's also had this longtime crush on her boss, Daniel, and eventually they end up together. They start dating, and she also keeps running into this man named Mark Darcy, and they have sort of like a bickering relationship. After Bridget walks in on Daniel cheating on her, she breaks up with him and gets a new job. But she keeps running into Mark, and she's starting to develop feelings for him. There's a lot of drama about Mark being in a relationship, and he wants to move to New York, and Daniel is still trying to pursue Bridget, but in the end, Mark and Bridget end up together. So what does Bridget Jones' Diary teach us about love? I think this movie teaches that you might fall in love with someone that you don't really like at first. This is a hate to love story, so that is the most basic lesson that it can teach us. But in terms of her relationship with Daniel, I think it teaches that sometimes the idealized version of a person that you have in your head is not actually who they are, and they could turn out to be a liar and a cheater. So be careful who you trust, and sometimes you have to think critically about the person that you want to pursue a relationship, and you can't always trust your perception of them. I think that's a pretty good lesson. So the next movie we're going to be discussing is The Prince and Me, and this is another movie that I love a lot. It's a movie I watched a lot as a kid, so I just want to talk about it. So before we get started, I made this connection a while back, and I think that The Prince and Me and Princess and the Frog have almost the exact same plot, minus the magic and stuff. Naveen and Prince Edward are both from another country, and they moved to America to party, basically. So they're not exactly the same, but on like the surface level, pretty identical. I love The Princess and the Frog, one of my all-time favorite movies. I actually did a review on it almost exactly a year ago, probably. I tried to upload it. I think I did upload it on Mardi Gras last year. So we're coming up on a year. Anyways, I will link it here or here. I'm actually a little bit embarrassed of that video. I wasn't that good at video making at that time. Still, I'm not the best, but I'm getting better. And also, I had just rediscovered my love for that movie, so I had a lot to say about it, and I would not shut up. I was very passionate. So it was a little bit embarrassing, but it's a good movie, and I think more people should be talking about it. I love The Prince and the Frog. That is not the topic of this video, though. Sorry for that tangent. But anyways, I made that connection that The Prince and Me and Princess and the Frog have very similar plots, but I'm going to tell you about The Prince and Me. So The Prince and Me is about a medical student named Paige and a Denmark prince named Edvard. Paige is very goal-oriented, she's very future-focused, whereas Edvard is not. He's very much a party boy, and he wants to have fun and avoid his royal duties. He's also not too excited about becoming king in the future. So Edvard convinces his parents to let him go to college in Wisconsin. They think it's for practical reasons, when in reality he's just going there to party and meet girls. He takes on Eddie as his new name to disguise himself, even though that's not that far off from his name. That's more of like a nickname, really. But anyways, he wants to remain anonymous and not be known as the Prince of Denmark. And it is here where he meets Paige. They have a sort of rocky friendship in the beginning, but they gradually get to know each other and kind of start to develop feelings. So Thanksgiving comes around, and since Edward doesn't have any family in the country, Paige has pity on him and she invites him home for Thanksgiving. During the holidays, they grow closer and they end up kissing, which kind of makes things more official. Back at school, his identity is revealed and Paige is very mad at him. Eddie also learns that his father is sick, so he returns to Denmark, and then Paige realizes how much she actually loves him, and so she goes after him and travels to Denmark to find him. During the visit, he proposes to Paige and they start planning the wedding. Eddie has started to take his responsibilities as prince and soon to be king very seriously, and his parents are warming up to Paige. They see how much she has changed him for the better and made him a more responsible person, and they also get to know her as a person. After a while, Paige starts to think about her life and her career and her dreams, and she sees how good Eddie is doing at his job, and it reminds her of the future that she always envisioned for herself, her future as a third world country doctor. She realizes that her dreams are still a part of her, and she decides that she has to go back to Wisconsin to finish her medical degree. At Paige's graduation, Eddie shows up and he tells her that he's willing to wait for however long it takes for her to achieve her dream because he really wants to be with her. So what does The Prince and Me teach us about love? It teaches us that you could meet a person that changes you for the better, and those kinds of people are worth hanging on to and waiting for. Paige helps Eddie realize that he is very immature and he needs to step up to his royal duties, and Eddie teaches Paige that you don't always have to treat life so seriously, because if you do, then you're going to miss out on a lot of things in life. I think it also teaches that love isn't just about ourselves. Even when Paige decides that she wants to go back home to finish her medical degree. Eddie wants what's best for her, and he supports her decision, even if that means they can't be together. I think this movie displays a level of maturity about love that a lot of rom-coms fail to show. And despite the whole Prince plotline, I think this movie is more realistic as well. Love is about wanting what's best for the other person, even if that doesn't involve you. Love is about the other person and not what they can do for you, but what you can do for them. That's not to say that it should be one-sided either. That feeling should definitely be mutual, and they should want the same for you as well. So I think that's what The Prince and Me teaches us about love. It teaches us about a more selfless type of love versus a self-serving type of love, if that makes sense. So if I look any different, it's because it's a different day. I had to stop recording yesterday, so we are back, and let's get into the next movie. So the next movie we're going to be talking about is Penelope. And this movie is about a girl named Penelope who has the nose and ears of a pig. But before we talk about her, we have to kind of go back a little bit to understand how she got here. So many years ago, the daughter of a witch was involved with one of the Wilhern boys, and I have a problem pronouncing their last name, so I may pronounce it many different ways. I will put how it's spelled here. I don't know why I'm having trouble with it, but I am. So, the daughter of a witch was involved with one of the sons of that family, and that family is very high society. They have a lot of money, and they have a lot of status. So, the family disapproved of the relationship so much that the witch's daughter commits suicide. And they didn't disapprove of her because of her being the daughter of a witch. They actually, I don't even know if they knew that fact, but they didn't approve of her because she's a servant girl, and the Wilherns are a very rich and high society family. So after the death of her daughter, the witch curses the entire family, where the next daughter of the Wilhern family will be born with the face of a pig. For many, many years, the Wilherns only had boys until Penelope. I think the mother was kind of paranoid about her being a girl because of this whole curse, but it had also been almost, I think it was 5 generations since a girl was born, so I don't know if they took it too seriously. You know, it had been so much time since that curse had been initiated, so I don't know how they felt about that, but I know that when she was born, her mother was very surprised, and it affected her so much that she faked her daughter's death and kept her captive in their mansion for her whole life. It's kind of like a Rapunzel situation. So as Penelope gets older, her parents start setting her up on dates with rich men because the spell basically says that she has to get someone from her own kind to love her. During these dates, the men have to come to the mansion and they talk through a one-way mirror so they can't see Penelope. Everything goes really great until Penelope reveals herself and the men run away screaming. This happens every single time. Eventually, a guy named Edward comes to go on a date with Penelope, but when Penelope reveals herself to him, he actually goes to the press with this. And everybody thinks he's crazy except one reporter. This reporter hires a guy named Max to go on a date with Penelope. So they equip him with a hidden camera, and he goes to work to get a picture of Penelope for the newspaper. He's actually in a room with a bunch of other suitors. Instead of her normal routine, she just invited everybody in at one time. And Penelope, in a defeatist mood after all of her unsuccessful dates, she just reveals herself right away to this room full of men. And everybody runs away screaming except for Max because he actually didn't even see her. The family thinks that everybody has left, but when they look on their surveillance camera, they see that Max is still there, and this renews their hope for Penelope's love life. So Penelope and Max spend a lot of time getting to know each other through this one-way mirror. And they realize they have a connection, so they talk about music, they play chess, and Max tells her all about the outside world and about his favorite pub, and they just have a really good conversation going. Eventually, after a couple of dates, Penelope does show her face to him, and he accidentally gets a picture, and he's upset by this because he has gotten to know her as a person, and he doesn't feel like exploiting her anymore. So he leaves, destroys the camera with the picture on it, and quits the whole operation. Penelope finally gets the courage to escape the mansion, and she goes to live in the city. She wants to remain anonymous, so she uses a scarf to cover up her face, and she also sells photos of herself to the press to make money. She lives in a hotel and makes friends at a local pub, but one day she passes out at the pub and her identity is revealed. Instead of being villainized and outcasted like her mother thought she would be, she is loved by all and becomes a celebrity. Seeing her celebrity, Edward's father convinces him to propose to Penelope. And if you remember, Edward is the guy that went to the press initially and got the whole operation started. So it's the day of the wedding, and Penelope realizes this is not what she wants at all. She realizes that she actually does love herself just the way she is. And it was at that moment the curse was broken because she loved herself. And the whole spell was about getting someone of your own kind to love you. And it was about herself the whole time. The key to breaking the spell wasn't some rich guy marrying her. It was loving herself and accepting herself just the way she was. Because she spent her whole life trying to break the spell and fix her face, she never really learned how to love herself. So after some time passes, Penelope becomes a teacher, and she finds out that Max's true identity is a guy named Johnny, who's just this regular normal guy. He doesn't have any high society family or anything like that. He's just a normal guy. So she goes to find him, and they kiss and they start dating. So that witch from the beginning was disguised as the Wilhern's butler the whole time, so she's seen how Penelope's mother treated her, and she curses Penelope's mother because her mother was the reason that she had such a low self-esteem and was unable to love herself for so long, and thus we get a satisfying ending to the movie. So, what does Penelope teach us about love? I think it teaches us that love is not dependent on looks. It depends on what's inside and how well we get along with the other person. Penelope also teaches that self-love is very important. Loving yourself is one of the hardest things you can do. It is so easy to look at another person and see all the good things about them and love them for that, but it's much harder to look introspectively and to love yourself for the same reasons. It also teaches that money and class should not be a factor in who you fall in love with. The whole curse started because the Wilhern family didn't approve of the relationship between their son and a servant girl because it was below them. Then Penelope's parents thought that the whole curse was about finding a high-class, high-society guy that could fall in love with Penelope and look past her face, and basically love her despite her face. In the end, Penelope broke the spell by just loving herself, and then she started dating just a normal everyday guy, and they seem very happy. This movie is just so incredibly sweet and wholesome, and I just love this movie. So the next movie we're going to be talking about is called He's Just Not That Into You. This is one of those movies that have a lot of different storylines and they all connect. Think movies like Love Actually, Valentine's Day, and New Year's Eve. Movies like that. So the main storyline is one that we are going to focus more time on than the others. So this one, there is a girl named Gigi, and she's played by Jennifer Goodwin. Gigi grew up believing, like a lot of us, that if a man likes you, he may not act like it. He will give you mixed signals, but deep down, he actually cares, or something like that. You know that common phrase that a lot of little girls hear? He's only mean to you because he likes you. It was a way for adults to soften the blow of bullying, but it was also repeated so often that it's kind of ingrained in us. So Gigi has been on a lot of dates with this philosophy in mind. Until one day she meets a bartender named Alex, and he lets her in on a little secret. If a man acts disinterested or he doesn't call you, it's because he's actually not that into you. Hence the title of this movie. So Gigi ends up coming to him whenever she has dating questions, and he continues to give her advice. After some time, Gigi reverts back to her old ways and interprets his friendliness as a romantic interest. After a big fight, Gigi and Alex go their separate ways, and Gigi starts to date other people until one day Alex realizes that he actually does like Gigi. So he goes to her apartment and confesses his feelings to her. The end. Well, not actually. Like I mentioned before, there are many other storylines, and I will try to keep this simple without losing the point of the story. So this movie portrays a lot of people who are in different stages of their love life, and the first one we're going to be talking about is the couple who is married, but the guy meets somebody else, and he cheats on her, and they separate. So this is kind of a crazy story. The husband meets a girl named Anna at the grocery store. They kind of hit it off. They really like each other, but in the end he tells her that he's married, but he can help her with her music career. So he gives her his number. But instead of being mature and doing the right thing and just helping this woman with her music career, he continues to put himself in situations where he could cheat. He goes night swimming with her as just friends, and he even goes to her apartment to hang out, among other situations where there is more opportunity to cheat on his wife. It's just so stupid. And he also starts smoking again, which is something that his wife is very sensitive about. Her dad died because of smoking, and so he quit, but he started smoking again, and she started finding evidence of this, and he continues to lie to her and tell her, oh, I'm not smoking, why would you say that, and all this. But he is. He just continues to do it behind her back. I don't like this man. Thankfully, he doesn't end up with either of these girls, so I think that this is a pretty happy ending to a really crappy story. The next couple is a couple who have been together for about 7 years, and the girl wants to get married, but the guy does not believe in marriage. This one's a little bit sad to me because the girl has kind of made it pretty clear that marriage is something that she wants, and the guy doesn't believe in marriage. He says he's committed to her and he loves her and he wants to be with her forever, doesn't want anybody else, but he just doesn't want to marry her. She comes to terms with this a lot, but she's constantly reminded of how much she wants marriage. So they have this discussion again, and one day she just has had enough and she leaves. After her sister's wedding, her father has a heart attack. Upon hearing this, the boyfriend comes to help out. He really does care for her. He really loves her and wants to be there for her during this hard time. This is contrasted by her sister's new husband, who does almost nothing to help out. And the woman realizes that she would rather be with somebody who loves her and cares for her than to be married to somebody who doesn't. She agrees to compromise and stay together, but unmarried. And the guy has actually had some time to think about this, and eventually one day he does propose and they do get married. The third story is the complicated couple. This is actually about Anna, the one from the cheating story, and another guy. They are romantic, but they're not really together. The guy loves Anna, but Anna is just unsure about the whole situation. This one ends with Anna leaving and the guy finds somebody new. I think that's everything. I think that's all the stories that are really important. So the story where the guy refuses to get married to the girl is kind of a confusing one to me. Like, it's one thing to believe in marriage, but it's something that both partners should agree on, and it should not have gotten as far as it had without some sort of, like, serious conversation about this. Like, it seems like they've had plenty of conversations about this, but if you and your partner want different things, then you may not belong together. I don't know. It's kind of like if one partner wants kids and the other one doesn't. That's something that's kind of important, you know? Like, sometimes the person who doesn't want kids will change their mind, but it's kind of unlikely and it's something I wouldn't bet on. Also, if you see yourself growing up with this person and you love them and you don't want anybody else and they want to get married, it kind of wouldn't hurt to just get married if you're going to stay together forever anyways. And if you really feel that way about that person, you know what I mean? So, I don't know. They've been together for 7 years, so it's like, at this point, it's just a piece of paper, you know? Like, so anyways, what does He's Just Not That Into You teach us about love? I think it teaches that love is complicated. You could be in love one moment and out of love the next. Your husband could cheat on you and lie to you. And a pretty prominent lesson in this movie is that you could fall for someone that you don't expect to fall in love with. And saying that, I've noticed that that's kind of a common theme in a lot of these rom-coms. Very interesting. But yeah, I think a prominent lesson in this movie is just you could fall in love with somebody you don't expect to fall in love with. That's actually how 2 of the stories end in this movie. Another thing I think it teaches us is that love is compromise. And that's displayed in the couple who had been in a relationship for 7 years but weren't married. They both had to compromise. Eventually, the woman was like, okay, I want to be with you forever, but I'm going to compromise and not get married. And then later, the guy was like, she really wants to get married, so I'm going to compromise and propose. So, in the end, they both got what they wanted. They both wanted to be with each other no matter what, so they seem happy. So the next movie we're going to be talking about is The Backup Plan, starring Jennifer Lopez. Jennifer Lopez is one of those people that has been in a lot of rom-coms, especially in the 2000s and 2010s. So I had to include at least one movie with her in it. I was going to do a review of the movie Marry Me, but then I realized I had to get a Peacock subscription, and I already have too many subscriptions, okay? I don't need another one. Please stop coming up with new subscriptions. I'm already enticed to get a Discovery Plus subscription. I don't need any more, okay? I have Disney Plus, Hulu, and Netflix, and then all of the free ones. I think that's it. Amazon Prime. Sorry, that's a discussion for another day. So, The Backup Plan, that's what we're talking about. So this is about a woman whose love life is not really going the way that she wants it to. It's not following her timeline, and she's worried that she's going to run out of time. And so she decides to undergo artificial insemination. Right after this procedure, she meets the love of her life named Stan. And they have to figure out how to make it work with her being pregnant with kids that aren't his, and it's just this big mess. So the romance in this movie happens really fast. It all is contained in the span of like 9 months. You know, the length of a normal pregnancy. So to me, that's a little bit too soon to really know if you love somebody. But anyways, they go on a few dates, and after she finds out that the procedure was successful, she tells him that she's pregnant. He freaks out, but after some time to think, he immediately goes headfirst into this relationship and assumes the role of father-to-be. They go through many trials. Zoe doesn't really trust that he's going to be there forever because she has abandonment issues, and Stan also has issues with trust that stem from a lot of things in his past. So they really have to learn to trust each other. And sometimes they take out their emotional issues on each other and they fight. Spoiler alert, in the end they have the babies. Yes, babies. They had twins, and then they get engaged, and extra spoiler alert, at the very end of the movie, she throws up, and we automatically assume that she's pregnant again, even though these kids are still little. So what does The Backup Plan teach us about love? I think it teaches that love takes trust, and sometimes you have to put aside your past relationships and how those went in order to move on with your new one. You have to trust the person before you know that you truly love them, stuff like that. So that's one of the lessons, but I think it also teaches, like a lot of the other movies I've talked about, that love is unexpected. It happens when you least expect it. This woman thought that she was going to be alone forever, that she was never going to meet a good guy, so she goes for her backup plan to become a single mother. Then she ends up meeting a guy. So yeah, I think that's another element to the story, that love happens when you least expect it. So the next movie we're going to be talking about is Baggage Claim, and this is a movie I haven't seen in a very long time, so my summary of this is going to be a little bit brief. So this movie is about a flight attendant named Montana who is under constant scrutiny by her mother to get married, and then when her sister becomes engaged, she's under even more pressure. So she decides that she wants to find her potential husband before her sister gets married in 30 days. So Montana and her friends devise a plan for her to reconnect with her exes, figure out why they broke up in the first place, and see if she can rekindle any of that romance. But like I said, she has to do that in 30 days. After having no luck reviving her past relationships, Montana gives up on her quest to find a future husband before the wedding, even though she knows her mom is not going to be happy about that. After her sister's fiance calls off the wedding, she decides that she doesn't even need a husband. She's pretty okay on her own. And then Montana realizes that true love was under her nose the entire time, in the form of her best friend William. So they end up together, and he proposes, and it's happily ever after. So what does Baggage Claim teach us about love? This is another friends to lovers story, so maybe it teaches that you could fall in love with your best friend one day. I think it teaches that you also have to be okay with yourself first and foremost. Also, don't listen to people who talk about your relationship status, and if you're okay with being your own woman, then that's fine too. So now we're going to talk about the Netflix movie Always Be My Maybe. So I thought Always Be My Maybe was going to be about childhood friends who grew apart and they have like this meet cute years later, and that's sort of correct, but it's a lot different than I expected it would be. So this movie's about childhood friends whose friendship ends in this big fight after they slept together. Then they never talk to each other again until 16 years later. So Sasha is a celebrity chef, and Marcus works for his father's company as well as plays in a band. During the opening of one of Sasha's new restaurants in San Francisco, they meet up again and rekindle their friendship and relationship. However, their lives are so different now that they fight all the time. After the opening of her San Francisco restaurant, Sasha's supposed to go to New York to open a restaurant there. She wants Marcus to come too, but he is sort of scared of change. He's too attached to his life in San Francisco, and he's also kind of resentful of her lifestyle as a celebrity chef. This leads to another big fight. Sasha leaves to go to New York, and Marcus stays in San Francisco. After some time, Marcus realizes that he is living his life according to his comfort zone and not doing what he actually wants to do. He also realizes that he wants to be with Sasha, so he goes to New York to find her, and they get together and live happily ever after. Just as a side note, this movie started out super interesting. I was really into it. I was like, oh my gosh, this may turn out to be one of my favorite movies. In the beginning, it shows their friendship when they were kids. It shows how close they were and how they got to do all of these fun things. It also shows how Sasha was close to his parents as well, because she really didn't have her parents around for her childhood. They were running a convenience store, I think it is, so they're oftentimes at work and she's stuck at home. So he would go to her house and invite her over for dinner. It was just so cute. I thought it was really interesting in the beginning. And it also shows like all kinds of visuals of like the 80s and the 90s. It's just really cool. I'm also a big fan of friends to lovers stories because I think it's probably more believable than, you know, you meet a stranger and fall in love, that sort of thing. I do like a good friends to lovers story, but this one was just different. The things that they said to each other in like the heat of the moment were very cruel, I think. They were very hurtful, and I feel like they could leave emotional scars. I know that in the heat of the moment you say things, but they both hit pressure points that the other was very sensitive about. I expected a really sweet love story, but this felt very toxic. I mean, it turns out fine, and you can tell that the characters love each other, but throughout the whole length of the movie, they're just kind of mean to each other, and I don't like it. So what does Always Be My Maybe teach us about love? I think if we put the hateful language aside, it teaches us that getting out of your comfort zone can lead to very healthy relationships. It teaches that friends sometimes make the best relationships because you already know that person very deeply. And I also think that it teaches that love is about compromise and support. So now let's talk about Single All the Way. I wanted to do a Christmas movie in this list because I feel like a lot of Christmas movies are actually romantic comedies set during Christmas time. So I thought that this would be really interesting because it also combines two rom-com tropes, the fake lovers trope as well as the friends to lovers trope. And actually the fake lovers trope doesn't really play that much of a part, but during the trailer, I thought it would be more of a factor. So this movie is about a guy named Peter who is going through a breakup, and he convinces his best friend Nick to come home with him for the holidays and pretend to be his boyfriend so his family doesn't freak out that he's single again. But before he can tell his family that they are together, Peter's mom is setting him up on a blind date with this guy named James. After some nagging, Peter finally agrees to go on the blind date, and he lets go of the whole fake relationship agreement that he made with Nick. So James turns out to be this great guy. They have a lot of chemistry, and Peter really likes him. But his family is starting to get the idea that actually Nick and Peter should be together. So they start scheming and trying to figure out ways that they can make Peter and Nick spend more time together, and they put them in situations forcing them to be closer. They even try to sabotage one of Peter and James' dates. Eventually they convince Peter and Nick to help with the Christmas play so that they could bond over this project. The family's scheming works, and Peter and Nick are starting to realize that they have feelings for each other. After the play, Nick confesses his feelings to Peter, but before Peter can say anything, James walks in and asks if they both want to go out for drinks. Nick says that he'll catch up later, but he never shows up. Nick decides he's just going to go home, and after Peter realizes this, he goes to find him. Peter finds Nick inside of an empty store, and it is revealed that Nick bought Peter this place so that he could finally open up the plant shop that he's always wanted to open. They both confess their feelings and decide to move to New Hampshire, where Peter's family is, and it's a very happy ending. So let's talk about the family real quick. I loved the family, especially in the beginning. I thought that they were all very loving and sweet and caring. I just feel like we don't see that enough in movies, especially Christmas movies. It shows a lot of dysfunctional families, and I'm kind of tired of seeing that. Like, I see enough of dysfunctional families in real life. We don't have to portray that on screen all the time. You know what I mean? Like, I want to see more families like this that are caring and loving. That is, until the movie progresses. So the family just gradually gets creepier and creepier as time goes on. The family starts talking to Nick about how they think he should be with Peter, and at that time it didn't seem like something that either one of them were considering. Like, legitimately, they were going to do the whole fake fiance or fake relationship thing, but it doesn't seem like something that they were thinking about before. I don't know, maybe I missed some clues or whatever, but it just seemed like it came out of the blue. And then they're like stalking them and trying to set them up and trying to get them to spend time together, and it just felt very manipulative on the family's part. Like, I just felt like they meddle too much and think they know what's best for Peter, and by extension Nick. It's just kind of creepy and unnecessary, and it would have been more interesting if Peter and Nick had come to the conclusion that they like each other on their own and in a natural and more authentic way. And James is a really nice guy too, and they also have a lot of chemistry. And on one of the dates that they're on, they go to Peter's family's pub or bar, and the sister spills drinks on James and then starts talking bad about Peter in front of James. It's just kind of cringy a little bit. It's just weird of the family to meddle this much and think that they know what's best for these people. And I know Peter is their family, but like, I don't know. I would feel really uncomfortable if my family did that to me. All I'm saying. Sorry about that tangent. This movie felt very much like a Hallmark movie, even though it was made by Netflix. It was just a lot of fun in the Hallmark sort of way, because Hallmark makes very cheesy movies, but they're fun movies to watch with your friends and your family and kind of like joke about, you know? So I kind of felt this way about this movie. It was really fun and simple. It was just overall a very Hallmarky Christmas movie rom-com. And I think this movie does a really good job at being another cheesy romantic Christmas movie. So what does Single All the Way teach us about love? I think that, like a lot of Friends to Lovers story, this one teaches us that your partner should be your friend first and foremost. I think it also teaches that you should know your partner very well before you enter a relationship with them. Nick and Peter knew each other very well before they started their relationship, and I think that's kind of important. So after all of those romantic comedies, I think we need a little bit of a palate cleanser. So I have picked out the anti-romantic comedy, and that is Isn't It Romantic? This movie ended up being really cute, and while I do still consider it an anti-romantic comedy, it does follow a lot of the same tropes and storylines that romantic comedies do. Isn't It Romantic is about a girl named Natalie, and Natalie has grown up her whole life believing that rom-coms are a thing of fiction, and love like that could never happen to a person like her. She used to watch romantic comedies as a kid, and her mother would come into the room and tell her that things like that don't happen to people like them, and she has always remembered this. Natalie is now a grown woman and she works for an architect company in New York, and she's very cynical about romantic comedies, so she rants about this to her best friend until one day she gets mugged and knocked unconscious and wakes up in a romantic comedy where she is the main character. Natalie concludes that the only way to wake up from this dream is to figure out who her true love is. At first, she thinks it's this rich guy, and then she thinks it's her guy friend who's about to get married, and then in the end, she realizes that it was herself all along. All her life, her mother has put her down and made her believe that she was not worthy of the love that she sees in romantic comedies, and this took a toll on her self-esteem. At the end of this coma dream, she realizes that she just needs to love herself, and she wakes up ready to conquer the world. She stands up to everyone and has this newfound confidence that changes her life for the better. She also realizes that her guy friend really does like her, and it's something that she was oblivious to before. She just assumed that he would want to be with someone who was quote-unquote hotter, so she never come to that conclusion on her own. But anyways, she realizes this and then they start dating. Isn't It Romantic makes fun of all of the common tropes in very clever ways. I think that this movie teaches us that we shouldn't take all of our love advice from the romantic comedies we grew up watching, but we should also have the confidence to realize that we are worthy of a love so magical that it could be in a romantic comedy. So in conclusion, I think we learned a lot from these movies. I grew up watching romantic comedies, so it was very interesting to revisit some of these and figure out what the true meaning was behind them. I think it's hard to pinpoint a single lesson that we learned from all of these movies today, but if I could give just one, I think it would be that love is unpredictable. It can happen when you least expect it, and it can happen with people that would surprise you. It could be with someone you initially hate, it could be with a best friend, or it could even be with a stranger. It's really all a matter of luck. This project has been a long time in the making, and I'm so glad to finally have it done. I hope you all have a wonderful Valentine's Day, and if you aren't in a relationship, be your own Valentine. There are no rules. So I bought this headband to wear during this video because I wanted to be a little bit festive. You know, it's Valentine's Day, we should all have a little fun. But they are completely out of frame. Like, you don't even see the hearts at all. But now I don't know what to do with this because I never got to use it. And it's kind of like I would never wear this anywhere. Maybe I'll give it to like a kid or something. If I find a kid, maybe I'll give it to them. I don't know. Oh, and look at this. I did this in the yesterday's portion as well. I drew a little heart on my cheek with an eyeliner and my makeup. Very proud of it. I think I look very, very Valentine's Day, very festive. And yesterday's was much brighter than it is today. Like I had like neon pink on my eye yesterday. So this one's a little bit toned down, but I still really like it. And I don't know why I picked out this necklace to wear with this. It's not really like a Valentine's Day necklace. It's just like a moon. But I don't know. I thought it looked cute. I think chokers look cute with like cool looking sleeves. I don't know. Anyways, I hope you enjoyed this video. I will see you in the next one. Bye.